Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be working in Procreate today, and I'm going to do a little bit of fan art. And I do apologize that the last, I think 2-ish weeks, I haven't been doing any talking videos, minus the videos on Monday where I did more like sketchbook real-time sessions. But I am going to be returning back to kind of integrating ASMR-ish kind of content alongside with my normal drawing videos in the kind of more normal schedule that I had before. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, but for now, let's talk about what we're going to be drawing for today's session. So starting off, I am going to be using the larger painting brush to kind of block out the pose and the composition for today's piece. And the piece in mind that I had for today, I kind of had something specific I wanted to tackle. And luckily, 17's Wonwoo and Jeonghan have a kind of a single album coming out. So they are promoting as a duo for this particular album. And they have really beautiful, and I love these concept photos so much. So they have kind of like 3 sets of concept photos, at least from my knowledge, if I remember correctly, the naming convention that they had. I guess the most recent one at the time of when this video comes out, it was the Blue Blood photos, and then we had the concept photos for A Midsummer's Night, which is what I'm going to be drawing for today's video. And then the ones before that was actually the Blackout City, I think 2 in 1. So for their concept photos, they had like very different aesthetics. Blackout City had more black and white, very monochromatic kind of dark aesthetics, while the photo that I'm kind of referencing and kind of doing almost like a study of the particular concept photo, I'll put it on the screen so you guys know what I'm referring to. So the Midsummer's Night have a more ethereal, kind of light, warm feeling kind of photos, almost fae-like or like fairy-esque in terms of like aesthetic. So it's a little bit softer, brighter colors. I don't know, just very pleasing for the most part, and I absolutely adore this particular photo of Jeonghan and Wonwoo on this like little boat on the water with a bunch of foliage behind them. Now with that being said, I was not ambitious enough to do a full study of the entire piece. I kind of cropped inwards to kind of fit the aspect ratio of the particular canvas that I decided to choose, which I chose to draw on an A4 size, so about 8.5 by 11, because eventually I would like to make this a print because there is a K-pop market that I'm going to be attending, and it would be nice to kind of spruce up my selection with some recent stuff going on with the fandoms that I'm in. So I decided to crop inwards to make it make a little bit more sense. I wanted to kind of focus a little bit closer to the figures of Jeonghan and Wonwoo rather than having, I don't know, I do like the composition better of the actual original piece. So for, I guess like if you're not actually watching the video currently and you didn't see like the reference photo that I'm currently kind of referencing for the drawing, the almost like 2/3 has Jeonghan and Wonwoo, and they're kind of filling up the upper left-hand corner for the most part, and the rest has like foliage on the right with a bright light coming in, and almost like the bottom third of the composition has water. And I don't know, I really like the composition a heck of a lot, so maybe I'll do some like doodling and stuff just to keep it in memory. But for this particular piece, I just wanted to focus on just Jeonghan and Wonwoo, and then I can just play around with something in particular. So I'll probably talk about this more once we get into the coloring phase, or actually coloring in the figures, because something that I kind of struggle with sometimes when choosing color palettes or approaching a specific type of color palette, which is something a little bit softer, more lighter and airier. I definitely find myself, because of how I approach the rendering and cleaning up portion of my artwork, I tend to make certain parts a little bit more sharper and a lot darker, which makes your eyes kind of like have an easier time identifying like certain parts of the piece, if that makes sense, like hair strands. Oh, you can see where the eye is, or the face, or like the contour of the clothing and all that. But the thing that I struggle with is that anything that has more of a lighter, airier, softer, I guess like vibe or atmosphere or aesthetic, I definitely struggle with because I tend to push those areas to be a lot darker. And sometimes when I push them to be a lot darker, I feel like my colors lean towards more of a mid-tone range or has that really vibrant kind of look to it rather than it being a little bit more softer and just easier on the eyes, if anything. So I did do an attempt at this for a different piece, which I'll show in a little bit, but it's definitely something I want to get better at. So while I'm going to be working on this piece, you'll see that I am going to try to keep the color palette similar to the actual reference photo, and I'm going to try to keep it as kind of light and soft as possible, but I'm also going to take a slight shortcut near the end to make everything appear a little bit more dreamlike in a sense. And it's nothing too different from my usual process. It's just I take out one step a little bit later. So moving along, we are changing up my sketch's kind of like color to be a little bit warmer and softer, and I'm going to be doing the background. So initially when I was doing kind of my little rambling in the beginning, I did do my rough sketch to plan out the composition, place their bodies, and make sure that things are going to be like kind of like properly placed before I tackle to do my cleaner sketch. So Jeonghan is on the left and Wonwoo is on the right. Now, I believe Wonwoo is kind of like looking downwards in the reference photo, but I don't have a clear, I guess like shot of his eyes per se, so I decided to close his eyes completely, and then I don't know if Jeonghan's eyes are supposed to be open or closed, so instead I have his eyes open and kind of just peering up to Wonwoo. And I don't know about what's about this photo, it's just so cute in my opinion, and the aesthetic is just super pretty, and I don't know if it's like the softer atmosphere and stuff, it just seems so lovely to me. But I am super excited with the upcoming concept photos so far. So we have Blue Blood, and it's kind of like more darker with neon blue veins almost on their neck and their hands and like the face. So it's super cool, as well as I already forget the other one, what it's called. The Blackout City, which has more of the monochromatic and kind of more dramatic, kind of darker makeup. So I definitely want to do some either studies of those or just like my own versions of those concept photos in my style. And I don't know if I'm going to make them into videos, but it could be fun to do. But all in all, I just want to do some kind of artwork of those because I am super in love with these concept photos so much, and I'm super excited for the not comeback, for this particular unit debut. Because if you guys don't know, Wonwoo is like my ult. So like he's like my ultimate bias. He's like my number one out of every single K-pop group that I stan and all that stuff. And then Jeonghan is like my second runner up in 17. And obviously when I watch like 17 content or like new stuff come out and they promote other things, my second place tends to change. But for the most part, Jeonghan's like pretty much up there. And then every other member kind of fills the third spot and sometimes bumps my second spot. So that's kind of like my small little ranking. But I do love everyone in 17 so much. So hopefully in the future, I'll just like be able to continue to support each individual member as well. So let's talk a little bit more about the artwork once again. So after I changed the line art color or my sketch color to be softer, I ended up working on the background, which I tried out a few different brushes. I think I need to work on doing some environmental studies and just choose like a really chunky kind of textured brush so that I'm able to translate those environments in a more painterly way, because a part of me doesn't like the leaves that I did in the background because it kind of looks a little bit like kiddish or like childish painting, if anything. So the painting or the drawing that you see on the screen of my OC Maseki, which I'm going to be speeding through the time lapse of, was an attempt that I did a while back of wanting to do an airier kind of color palette. And you see that I had to add quite a bit of overlays and just color changing to make the palette fit the initial the initial thought of what I wanted the color palette to be. Because initially when I was blocking in Maseki's colors, everything became a little bit darker than what I wanted, and it also became more saturated. So I needed to push it back, mute the colors a little bit, add a lot of different complementary colors to kind of knock back the different hues that I had, because Masaki's color palette tends to be very warm, and in contrast with the background, he just stood out too much in my opinion. So yeah, I definitely wanted to do something along those lines in terms of making it definitely more softer on the lighter side of the color palette, if anything, or like value scale, because I didn't want anything to be super dark in this entire piece, even though it would help with a little bit of contrast. But like I said, I want to keep everything kind of on the airier side to give it more of that ethereal look. So as I'm blocking things in, I did lay down a very light, almost, I don't know, like sandy-ish color as the base, and I used this for the skin tone for Wonwoo and Jeonghan, and then I blocked in the hair color. Their clothing is also on the lighter side, minus that Wonwoo has some kind of blue patterning throughout, which I'll add in a little bit later using another blend mode layer setting, so that I don't have to worry about the different shadows and shapes as much as when I'm doing kind of like the cleaning up and rendering for the entire piece. So as I'm doing this portion of the coloring, I did merge my background layers to be one layer. I ended up using probably 3 different layers to kind of get a little bit more depth and to try my best to add as much foliage in a general manner, because I didn't want it to be the focus. And I do think the background came out a little bit too vibrant, but once I add an extra layer on top, it probably dull it down just a little bit to become softer. But after that, I made a new layer for Jeonghan and Wonwoo's colors. So I used the selection or the lasso tool to kind of go around the entire outline for the figures, and then I used the color fill option on the lasso tool to kind of fill the colors within my selection to be just one color. After that, I will alpha lock that layer so that any other lines or colors or markings that I want to make that might stray outside of my initial kind of color block won't show up, because everything will be contained in my initial selection. So it just makes it a lot easier for me to actually color in everything in a little bit more of a clean manner, because I don't want anything to kind of stray off and go into the background and I have to clean up like around it. So I just found this method a little bit easier, and I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't find out and use this method a lot earlier, since I used to manually color things one by one by doing like the skin tone first, then the hair, then the clothing, and then later on I would alpha lock stuff and, you know, do my blend modes, my added effects and stuff before I merged them. But I found this a lot easier. Next up, after I do all my rough coloring, I went ahead and went to my sketch layer, and even though it's a little bit on the softer side right now, I still ended up alpha locking it and changing the colors of the sketch so that it fits a little bit more appropriately. Now I know what happens when I usually merge my multiply layer onto a normal layer afterwards is that the outside lines tend to be a lot lighter. So to combat that, I like to add a darker color around the entirety of the figures to make sure that there's not too many lines that will kind of like revert back to being super light. Now it's not as noticeable on this particular piece just because the entire piece is actually quite light. I find it way more noticeable if the background is dark and I chose a very light color for my sketch. But for the most part, didn't have to do too much cleanup on the outlines. I did a extra layer for the kind of like rim lighting or softer lighting on the right hand side for Wonwoo and a little bit on Jeonghan. I'll lower the opacity a little bit, and I added an extra overlay layer to kind of like tone down some of the areas to be a little bit more cooler and then to pull a little bit more warmth from the face. I will also knock that down from 100 to probably maybe even like anywhere between 80 to 60% so that it's not super overbearing on the entire piece. After that, I will merge all my blend modes onto my main layer and we can start the kind of cleaning and rendering process, which I am tackling right now. So I'm not sure why, but I ended up working on Wonwoo first for every different step. So for the sketching portion, for the rough colors, for the rendering and the kind of cleaning up phase, I've started on Wonwoo first. And it gave me a little bit of time to kind of figure out how I wanted to approach this piece. Because like I said, every time I tend to do this step in the process, I tend to utilize the portion of where I darken up certain areas, like especially corners and edges, to make things stand out and appear more clean. But because I don't want to go too dark in this color palette, I was trying my best to pick colors that were not as like upfront and not very bold and super contrasty, because like I said, I want to keep things a little bit light and not too graphic, if anything. So I wanted to make sure these colors are a little bit on the softer side. They're not super dark compared to the surrounding areas, because I don't want them to stand out too much and make your eyes drawn to it immediately. So I want to keep everything kind of within the same ish value range for the most part in terms of the line work. Just nothing too dark, if anything. But because I find the rendering and kind of cleaning up process varies from piece to piece, but for the most part, like the core of it is mainly the same thing. I tend to fix up lines that I find that are kind of like stray lines, so they might just be in the way of the general shape of something or the color, so I'll get rid of it. I also start to use a little bit more line work to help define certain shapes. I will also block in, let's say, clothing folds if I need to, add extra details to make things look sharper, or I don't know, just like any kind of detailing. So if I wanted to add seams or like ribbing to sleeves and stuff, then I can add that during that time. But then for the most part, everything else probably remains the same, smoothing things out, making things look clean and crisp. So while I am doing that in the background, let's talk about what happened the last 2-ish weeks and kind of like the weeks leading up to before that, and the reason why I ended up doing kind of 2 weeks of ASMR and not really any of my normal videos for a little bit, which I know deters some people because they don't want the ASMR content. You prefer either talking or like music or something in the background instead. And I know that's like some people's preference, and I'm totally fine with that. So I'll be kind of returning back to my usual schedule of like slowly integrating them every so often within like the week or like within the month. So it won't be as like overbearing as the last 2 weeks were. But as you guys know, for the majority, I think of mid-ish April to the beginning or like mid-May, like a good 3 weeks, I sent my computer in to get repairs. So while my computers was in repairs, I was not able to make any kind of like ASMR content. So to kind of make up for that immediately, I wanted to do the following 2 weeks with ASMR content to kind of low-key catch up on particular, I don't know, ASMR content that I might have just missed out on at the time. So there is still a few other ones that I want to tackle, but like I said, I will be sprinkling them in as usual rather than just slamming you guys with 4 videos of just ASMR content. So hopefully that didn't deter too many people from being like, oh, she's like only gonna be doing ASMR content or something like that. So I will be kind of flip-flopping between the different formats as usual. So I was able to hopefully find a good setting alongside with combating with the fact that after I received my computer back, my fans on my computer, or like whatever it's like cooling my GPU or whatever the setting is that the sensor is kind of like picking up, it's been whirring super loudly. So I've been trying my best to find a good medium between making sure my computer doesn't overheat and my computer doesn't make too much noise, because before, when I made ASMR videos, before I sent in my computer, it was a lot easier to make sure that my computer was not humming super loudly and I could kind of record ASMR in peace. But the last 2 weeks when I was doing kind of the ASMR content, I was doing a lot of testing to see what worked and what didn't work. And hopefully I found the setting that kind of works with both of my needs in terms of I don't want to break my computer and I can still keep it quiet enough that it doesn't really pick up on the mic. So yeah. If anything, I think you guys probably won't notice the difference, hopefully. But for the most part, I think I have it all sorted out. So yeah, there should be not really any changes for you guys that much anyways. But in the future, or at least like up until probably until after June, if I end up making a lot more content that's kind of like K-pop related or 17 related, I do apologize, but I'm just trying to knock out things as I go, and it's a little bit easier for me to sometimes record the stuff that I want to turn either into merch, or I want to just like do personal drawings and stuff, so that there's a good balance. Because making either video stuff, or like I guess like in this case it would be content, and then having personal time to draw whatever I want versus making stuff for conventions and markets and stuff, it's been kind of hard to balance sometimes, especially like there's other things, like I'm helping my friend with some wedding stuff. She's finally picked out a dress, which I'm super happy, but it did take up a bit of my time to help her kind of like go through the dress picking process and stuff for her wedding. But I'm glad she finally found one, and it looks so pretty on her. So I'm trying to think what else to catch you guys up on. Oh yeah, if there's any particular videos that you guys want me to do, I'll probably make a like community post about it. But there are some that I want to do regarding like convention prep, so either more behind the scenes, either of sticker process. I'm making a lot of photo cards, maybe at home printing, or even I forget what's the main one that I wanted to do. I think it's like for commissions and stuff, if you want to do commissions at the tabling site, if that makes sense, at the venue. So I want to do something for that as well. And I don't know, I am going to try my best to kind of tackle all of those before the actual event happens, which is in August, which seems like a lot of time, but to give manufacturers enough time to kind of like make products and stuff, or for me to kind of catch up on certain things that I've kind of missed, I need a lot of prep time, because I was not really expecting to get into this particular convention, just because I was rejected last year and I was rejected from another one last year. So I had a lot of downtime-ish, but I did not spend that time making the merch at the time. So if you guys have any like questions about it, do let me know. I did table, I think, a few times throughout the years, so I do have like my own personal experience that I would love to talk to you guys more about if you guys are interested, or if you just want to see like any kind of particular videos, like me doing chibis for stickers or pixel art for sticker sheets or anything like that, then just let me know, and I'll definitely try to incorporate that into my little scheduling and hopefully make a video about it. But in the meantime, as we are working on the piece, this is kind of like where I'm at. So I did do the patterning for Wonwoo using a multiply layer, and then I did an extra one for Jeonghan's pattern on his sweater. But this is how I'm going to achieve kind of more of a dreamier look. So I decided to do the same thing that I usually do, which is merge all my layers into a folder, and then I will Gaussian blur it to a certain extent. But instead of erasing certain areas to make things in focus, I decided that I would just lower the opacity down for the entire piece that I blurred, and it kind of gives it a unfocused kind of dreamy atmosphere for the entire piece, which I think looks super pretty for it. So I decided to do that in the end instead of the usual blurring that I do. I did add a little bit of foliage into the front very simply, just because I wanted something to kind of frame it a little bit better, since this might be a little bit of an awkward composition. After that, I added some extra lights here and there, which is very similar to the ones in the actual reference piece. But I didn't want to follow too closely, because even though I liked the piece a lot and I wanted to draw it more in my style, I didn't really want to do like a 1-for-1, if that makes sense. So it's not like a super like master study-ish kind of thing. It's just like a normal study where you kind of focus on what you want to focus on. But I think that's it for today. So we're just going through the time-lapse replay, and yeah, you can kind of see how I kind of approached this particular piece versus the original reference photo that you saw at the very beginning. Hopefully you guys don't mind that this video was more 17 focused, if anything. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video though. And yeah, this is kind of what this particular piece looks like. I guess I decided that I wanted to lower the kind of softness on everything, like the blurred layer, to be a little bit less apparent. But I think that's the end of today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!